but I thought it would be great just to give you a little bit of an overview of how satellite imagery works, just so that if you're coming across satellite imagery for your projects and you want to add some images, you can do that. So let me share my screen. Okay, so housekeeping, everybody knows recording the session. Please disable your video, keep yourself on mute until we go into discussions. And then we'll keep up with the chat as much as we can during the session. So a few goals for today. First, I actually would like to do an overview of some of the GIS analysis that we talked about last week. And then I'll talk a little bit about how satellite imagery works. I'll show you a couple of different data providers and how to add those data sets to your maps. And then if we have time at the end, we'll discuss everybody's final projects. I know that you haven't received feedback. I don't think everybody has yet, but they will be going out by the end of today, I promise. Okay, so here is a recap. I'd like people to raise their hand and go off mute and talk about what they learned last week. So what are the 3 types of overlays? Does anybody remember? And if you are using it for your project, you can talk about that as well. Bernice?
I can name one of the overlays. So one of them is joining the layers. So joining the layers when you want to merge it, and I'm using it as state by state to show and visualize my data and how many there are in the states. I was able to get a lot of help from you through email as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Can you also share what I shared about what you need for both data sets? Sort of like the similarity between them. And if anyone else remembers how table joins work as well, feel free to raise your hand and jump in.
So I believe you mentioned that you need our layers to communicate to each other. So if you have one layer to be, for example, states, the other layer must have something to be states as well in order for it to overlap or to talk to each other.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bernice. Does anybody remember the 3 kinds of overlays? So when you have 2 different data layers and you're adding them to a map, there are 3 different ways that you can sort of use them to create a new sort of layer based on what is common on both of them. Amukta?
I don't quite remember the other ones, but you mentioned the about the table joins. Is it okay if I go into that?
Sure.
Yeah, so basically what a table join is that you join like the table of data to a layer based on its like value that it like that can be found in like both the fields, and table joins are non-spatial. So they have values that are contained, I guess, in the attribute table.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So, yeah, I think a lot of people will have a geospatial data set, as you mentioned, and then there's another data set that they want to join to it. So as you mentioned, it's a good way to sort of merge the two information together. And then I see Veronica in the chat for the overlays. Yes, erase is one of them. Overlap, I think, is what is an intersect. So we'll go through those two first. So erase is when you have two layers and you want to take out a section. It's basically just like an eraser where you can overlay the layers and then the parts of one layer that overlaps with the other one will be erased. Overlap, so that is what I think you're referring to is the intersect. So when two features intersect, it will basically do the opposite of an erase, and it'll keep only what is overlapping on the two layers. Does anyone remember the third one? It's not the opposite of both of them, but it's sort of a combination is a hint. Does anybody remember? Amukta?
Is it union? Like the combination of input and overlay areas?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So it, as you mentioned, it's just overlapping the two data sets and then just merging everything together. I know someone in the chat also, Kahang said merge. So yeah, it's basically like the same idea of merging the two data sets together. You're not really taking any information out and you're not really seeing or like combining the information and taking out the outside. So let's go into today's topic. We're going to go into a little bit of physics, just a little bit, to talk about some satellite imagery and remote sensing. So the way that remote sensing works is it picks up on different wavelengths on the Earth's surface. So everything on Earth absorbs and emits energy, and that energy is measured in wavelengths, which are on the electromagnetic spectrum. And if you're anything like me, I'm a very visual person, and so I have this graph to show everybody. So in the middle, you can see visible light. So this is what as us as humans can see.
Oh, I
So,
don't think we can see your screen.
oh, did I stop sharing? Sorry.
Screen is not on. Anna, yeah.
Okay, can everyone see my screen now?
So it's your, I think your Gmail we can see, not the, is it your, yeah, now we can see it.
Okay, hold on. I think it's still the wrong screen. Sorry, I think it kicked me out. My internet has been a little wonky lately, so I apologize for this. Okay, I think this is the right screen. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, it says wavelengths.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I'll just go back to this, the first slide, just as a recap, because I know that it might be a lot of new information to take in. And if you haven't taken like a physics class or like an environmental science class, it'll be very new information. But basically, everything emits energy, and that energy is on the electromagnetic spectrum. So this is a graph of the different kinds of wavelengths of energy. So it goes from short wavelengths to longer wavelengths. Right in the middle is visible light. So this is the energy that we can see. These are the different colors. You might have heard that like butterflies or bees and other insects can see other wavelengths. So that's sort of what other people are talking about when they mention that. So besides visible light, there are shorter wavelengths that are gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet rays. So if you ever broke a bone, that is an X-ray sort of image that they collected from you. So it's basically just obtaining the information from these specific wavelengths. And then on longer wavelengths, there's infrared, radar, FM radio, TV, shortwave, and AM radio. So this is sort of like the communications wavelengths that we use a lot. So radio stations are on different wavelengths, and then you sort of tune your radio to the wavelength that it's on to get to the specific channel. So for satellite imagery, I basically think of it like a camera where it's sort of capturing an image of a specific range of wavelengths for that area. So the different wavelengths for different satellites are classified into different ranges, and those are called bands. So if you've been looking at any satellite imagery for your projects, you might have noticed that some satellites have like information for band 1, band 2, band 3, and things like that. In a lot of satellites that capture just visible light, band 1 is usually the red parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, and then band 2 and 3 and so on are sort of like the different other colors and areas of that spectrum. This is sort of an example of what I'm talking about. So the bottom here are the different wavelengths again. And then on the y-axis, these are the different bands for a certain satellite. So band 1 here captures wavelengths just in this range. And that is what they're calling the aerosol part of the spectrum. Band 2 is capturing the blue wavelengths. Band 3 is capturing the green wavelengths, and so on and so forth. So for your final projects, we don't expect you to know everything about satellite imagery, but if you do want to use some information, I think this is the most important thing that you should take away, which are how to sort of read different satellite image products. So a lot of satellite imagery companies and organizations might create what is called an index. So they will sort of create a calculation that basically shows just a specific object on the ground. So for example, this green leaf here it emits 50% near infrared wavelengths, and it emits 8% red wavelengths. So they sort of put those values into this calculation, and it has an NDVI, which is the index of 0.72. So we know in that image, anything that is around an NDVI value of 0.72 are these specific plants. And these indices exist for a lot of different things. They exist for water, they exist for soil, they exist for built up areas. I think the most important thing to know is sort of how to read them. So it's really nice that they sort of have like the objects that they're trying to show in the name. So for example, NDVI is the normalized difference vegetation index. So we know that high values of this index show places where there's vegetation. For something like water, that is the NDWI. So you know that high levels of that index show places where water is. So I just want to show a really nice tool that Esri has that we feature on SDGs today that can sort of help you explore some satellite imagery and explore some other different indices for your projects. So I'll go to here. I guess if you need a refresher on how to navigate our website, this is our landing page. If you go into data, the satellite imagery data set that I will be showing is in SCG 15, Life on Land. And then it is this Sentinel-2, which is the name of the satellite, land use, land cover time series. So you can sort of explore the web app here, but I like to just have it up a little bit bigger. So I'll go into access data, and then under ArcGIS products, where you can see all of our layers and maps and web apps that we've made. I can scroll down to the web apps and then click on this Explorer. Click on View, and then now I have it up a little bit bigger. So here, what Esri has done, the scientists at Esri, they have classified the different pixels into different land cover classes based on the wavelengths that they're emitting that they've captured on satellites. So as you can see, the blue parts are water. So that's the values for water that they extracted from the satellite image. The red areas are built up areas. So usually that is like concrete or like rooftops. Those are usually the values they use for built up areas. Green are trees. The light green are flooded vegetation, and so on. So if I wanted to look at my area, which is here in New York, I can zoom and pan to my city. And then here you can sort of toggle on and off the different land cover classes. So if I was only interested in where trees are in my city, I can just click on trees, and then only the green parts will show up. What's also really nice is that there are these, this graph that has the land cover totals. So if I zoom into my area of interest, you can see that all these values change. And then I know that within this specific area, there's 27% water, 22% trees, 44% built up area. So this might be a nice tool that you can use to sort of extract different values. It's also really nice because they have data going from 2017 to 2023. So if I look at built areas and I zoom in to maybe a place in this part of New Jersey, I can see how much new built up areas have been added since 2017. And they're very slight changes, but you can kind of see it increase over the years. And if I go from 2017 and then to 2023 again, you can see that more built up areas have been added to this area. So the way that you can add this to your maps is they have this great button that just says publish to ArcGIS. So you'll click on that. Click on allow. It'll ask you to make a title, add some tags and a summary, and then it'll create a web map. And then you can open that web map that they created in the map viewer. And there are a few things that you can do to sort of show the information that you want. So first, you can pick the year of information that you want. So I want just 2023. So that is what is visible here. And I know that because it doesn't have the crossed out eye icon. But if I wanted to show any of the other years, I can just toggle that on. And then you can see on this timeline here, it's not showing any data because I am currently in just 2017. And that year is not being shown in my contents. So I'm just going to scoot it over to 2023. And now my data for 2023 is here. So then I can zoom into my area again. And I can delete all of these layers because I don't need these different years. But then I can add any other layers that I want that I've already created. So any like vector layers that you've created with points or any lines or polygons, you can add them on top of this layer. Another thing that you can do is in the right-hand side, there is what's called processing templates. So this is sort of what I was doing with the legend earlier, where I was just clicking on a certain kind of feature, and then it was filtering out everything except for that one. So if I, again, only wanted built areas, I can go into this processing template, built areas only, and then it shows only those built areas. One that might be useful for your project is flooded vegetation areas only. So if you're doing a project on floods and its impact on vegetation and things like that, you can use the flooded vegetation areas only template. And you can see that on this base map, it doesn't show up very well, especially because a lot of these areas are on the coast. So similar to the other maps that you'll make, you can just change the base map to whatever you want. You can also change the colors of these things. So if you go into styles and click on the options for unique values, you can change the colors for this as well. So if I wanted it to be a little bit of a brighter green, I'll click on the actual class, which is vegetation here, and I can change this color. So I can make it maybe a little bit more neon or something like that. So you can add this data set to your maps if you think it'll help tell your story and show sort of changes in vegetation or changes in water or built up areas and things like that. One other thing that you can do, let me just save and close this, is you can look at those indices that I was talking about earlier. So if you go into imagery, instead of land cover, you can see just the sort of raw satellite image for the area that I have panned to. And then here you can choose all of these different visual renderings, or what they're called here. So if I wanted to look at NDVI, which is the vegetation index, I can click on that. And then in this little pop-up, when you hover over it, you can see that dark green is good vegetation. So those are higher values of the index. And then brown represents sparse vegetation. So those are low values at that index. And you can see that a lot of the brown values are here, and there are also some areas that are sort of grayed out, so that just wasn't even vegetation in that area. And you can do the same for this moisture index. So the moisture index shows soil moisture and dry versus wetter areas in your area. And unlike the land cover classes, you can't export it into a web map. But what you can do is you can zoom into your area, and I'll just do this random area for now. I'm going to turn the map labels off, So that just turns off the street names and the buildings in this area and just shows me all of the pixel values. And then I can just take a screenshot with this camera icon. So save this map view as an image. It'll take a screenshot and then put it in my downloads. So if I wanted to sort of see the difference between 2 years, I can do the same for my other year, not moving the map at all, save it as an image, and then in your story map, you can either use the swipe tool for images, or you can put the images side by side, just to show the difference in those years. So that is it for the Land Cover Explorer. Why don't I put a link to this in the chat so that everyone can play around with it a little bit. This is the item detail page. And then I see a couple questions in the chat, so why don't I go through a couple of them first? Let's see. Oh, yes. Sarah, thank you for reminding me for the list of tools that use credits and how much they use. I'll put that in the Google Classroom. Veronica asks for a random request for the link for the major rivers of the world from the World Bank. If you can email the SDGs Today account, I can send that to you. But if there's time at the end of the session, I can look for it and post a link in the chat for you. I added the link in the chat, and Shriyan asks, so when we are looking for a satellite imagery data set in our web browser, do we type microplastic satellite imagery, or is there another term instead of data set? Yeah, so you can, maybe another good keyword to use is product. So if you're looking for satellite imagery that just shows sort of what I was talking about with like the vegetation index or the water index, those are what are called products. So instead of the raw satellite imagery, they've done some kind of calculation to show just the specific object. So you can look up microplastic satellite imagery product. And you can also look up, again, the same keywords as before, like download. And I will also show you in a couple of minutes how to add your own imagery to your map. If you find any on the internet and you want to download it and add it to your map, you can do that. Gianna asks, do we have to use ArcGIS mapping for our story map, or can we use the maps within our story map? Yeah, you can use the map tool within your story map. I think that is what you're asking. I think the only thing is that if you use the maps tool within the story map, there aren't as many capabilities that you can do with it, which is why we suggest using the ArcGIS Online map viewer first and then importing that into your story map. And yes, I can send some information about the guest speaker on Monday. I have a little bit of an overview of what she'll be talking about at the end of today's session. Okay, so let's get back into satellite imagery. I know that this might be a lot of information. GIS is a very big field, as you are learning this summer. So in the slideshows, I have sort of the basic steps for what I just showed, and we'll send this out to everyone as well. Okay, so adding your own images. So if you find a satellite imagery product that you want to use, first, I would suggest making sure that it is only in your study area, because these images can get very big and then it'll take up a lot of storage in your account, and it'll make your map load very slowly. So if you can, you should try to use just the study area that you're using. You'll download that file, which is called a TIFF file. So it's a .tif, which you can also use in your keyword search if you want to search for download and then search for TIF, and then maybe it'll show some images that you can download and add to your map. In ArcGIS, you'll create a tiled image and then you can add it to your map. So for example, this is a new data set that we just put up. On our platform for SDG 6, which is called WAPOR, which stands for the Water Productivity through Open Access of Remotely Sensed Data. So WAPOR for short, but it basically shows information on different aspects of water throughout the world. This is the web app that we were able to make with the data that we downloaded. So every month, we'll have the evapotranspiration rate in the areas globally for this current year, and then we'll have it for the year before. And with this swipe tool, you can, while everything loads, you can sort of see the difference between the 2 years for that certain month. So if you want to make something like this for your own projects, what you'll have to do is go to Access Data, and then in the original data link, you can go to the portal. So a lot of satellite imagery organizations and data sets will have their own sort of download portal, just like this one. And similarly to the Esri land cover one. And I think, as you can kind of tell when I open all of these different portals, the Wi-Fi gets a little bit choppy, so you know that it's a pretty big data set and it's taking up a lot of energy. So that's what's happening. A lot of the times they'll have this pop-up where you can take a tour of all of the different features that are in the portal. But for this one, I'll just show you sort of like the basics of it. If you want to get that same data set that is on our website, you would go to Explore Data. And then you can see all of the different kinds of data that they have for water productivity. So there's evapotranspiration, there's evaporation itself, and then transpiration itself. There's precipitation. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's also biomass production and primary productivity and things like that too. So what you'll do is you'll add one of these using the plus button. So I'm just going to take off what was already there and then add the monthly data set. So if I scroll into my study area again, I can see the information just for here. And then when you click on it, you can get the actual data that's in that specific pixel or cell that's in that satellite image. You should also pick the sort of month that you want. So here they have up to May of 2024. So that's the data that I want. And then if you go into, I think it's one of these. Measure different. You can use this sort of pencil tool to create your own area of interest. So I just clicked on the polygon tool and I can click anywhere and draw sort of my interest area. So if I want it to just be like the bottom half of Manhattan, I can create this polygon. I'll click done. And then you can see that in my map layers now, I have this one area that I'm looking at. And you can use this to extract the data from here. So if I click on the feature location, I can go into all of these different information about it. So the area of that polygon, the perimeter, in case those are of interest to you, the sort of major basin that this area is in. So here it says it's in the North Atlantic major basin, and all of these other information. If you go into the share button and go, oh shoot, I don't think that's it. Hold on, sorry. I just did this yesterday. But the other point is that taking the tour does really help sometimes, because then you'll know like exactly where to sort of download the data and explore the data and things like that. Let's go into, sorry. So I know that there's this download link, but I don't think this is not the kind of file that you should be downloading. Hold on. I know that there's an easier way. And with all of these, they're all sort of tricky in their own way, which is why it is important to sort of look through all of the things that are available here and see what is available for you to use and do. So sorry, I think there is a way to download this area itself. I'm just having a little bit of trouble figuring out how. But I think what you can do is if you click on the Explore Data button again and then go through the data that you want, you can scroll down and read all of the information. And then you can download the whole area. So as you can see, there's so much information that you can download, but the ones that you want are the tips. And then you can see they have their own like naming convention. A lot of satellite imagery products have a specific naming convention. And at the end of this one, you can see that it's the date. So you can just scroll down to the date that you want and then download the TIFF. Once you have your TIFF file, and maybe at the end of this session, I'll tinker around with this a little bit and see if I can figure out how to do that again. But once you have your TIFF file, you'll go into add content again. So in my content, I'll create a new item. And then in imagery layer, I would click on imagery layer. And I'll drag and drop it into here. So you won't be using a dynamic imagery layer because it takes up a lot more credits. There's a bunch of analyses that you can do, but it also doesn't really allow you to share it very publicly. So I think the best thing to do is to share it as a tiled imagery layer, which will just show the image itself. So I'll click on next. You'll probably be only downloading one image. So I'll click on one image. And then I'll drag and drop it into here. So I do have, oops. I do have the image that I downloaded yesterday. And I can drag and drop that in. Click on next. Add a title for it, add any tags, add a summary again, create your image. And then it might take a little while. But once your image is up, you'll be able to add it to a map and visualize it the way that you want, sort of similar to the other data sets that we've been putting on our maps here. So I know that that's going to take a while, so I'm just going to go into my content and find the one that I did yesterday. Actually, I think this is the one that just finished. So you can open it in Map Viewer. And then again, it'll show up in your contents. And it'll load here. If you go into styles, you can change the color of this. So I'm just going to change it to something that resembles water a little bit more. And then you can see the values here in the legend as well. So the lowest value is 131, the highest value is 11,000. So I would go back into this data set and see what the units are. So this is in millimeters per month. So I know that that's what this image on this map is showing. So that's it for that. Maybe we'll tinker around with this a little bit more. I'll just remove it and then there is a way to do it here. But let me add this in the chat if I haven't already. So that you guys can play around with it too. So we'll go into our discussion session, but I just wanted to say for next week, our guest lecturer is Rosanna Newhausler, who I met through work, and she studies coral reefs. So she uses some satellite imagery data methods to detect coral reefs. And she'll also talk a little bit about how sort of discussion around coral reefs and research have changed over time, and how people are now using more localized data and insights into managing coral reefs, whereas before people were using just like satellite imagery and data and not really talking to any of the locals or any indigenous people that have lived with that area for years and have managed it themselves. So that's our guest lecture on Monday. And then on Wednesday, we'll have another office hour section. But I'll stop sharing my screen. I know that there's a lot happening on my computer, so it's glitching a little bit and things are loading pretty slowly, but does anyone want to talk about their final project and any sort of analyses from last week that they're using for their project and any data sets that they found so far? I know that there's some items on the chat too, so let's see. Yeah, so next week is our last week of sessions. We'll have our guest lecture and then we'll have office hours. But your projects won't be due until the end of the month. So you'll still have some time to email us with any questions and come to office hours next week to ask any questions as well. Let's see.
There's one question, Anela, on whether your slides can be posted on Google Classroom. Do you think that's needed, or Or since we will be sharing the video of this session, I guess that will be fine. What do you think?
Yeah, we can download the slides. So in the slides, I also have some links that I shared in them too. So if you do download the slideshow, you'll have those links as well. So we can share that in Google Classroom. No worries. It looks like people are asking about specific data sets. So Aryan is looking for data sets on water quality. Shriyan is looking for river and lake microplastic pollution. If anyone has been able to find data on that, after this, I'll spend some time in Google Classroom where everyone can share their data sets and where they're finding data sets. Sarah asked, is there a specific place where we need to look for data sets? There's not a specific place. It's basically whatever you can find, but again, you can start with SDGs Today, or you can start with the Esri Living Atlas. And then again, in the Google Classroom, we'll have a place where everyone can share their data sets, and then you can see what everyone else has found as well. Zarella?
Yeah, I have one more question about like images and uploading like pictures into our story maps, and how would we make sure that we're not like infringing upon like copyright laws?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the image. If you are looking for just any image on the internet that might relate to your project, I would suggest looking at any like free stock images, just so that you know that you're able to use that. And then in the story map viewer editor, you can add like, there's like a little information button, and then that's usually where I would put like a link to credit the image. But if you're not sure if you have permission, you can contact that person, or you can see if there's any information on that website that has information on if you can share the image or not. I think usually if people don't want their images being shared, they'll have like a watermark or something like that, or it'll specifically say that you can't share it. But if you're having trouble figuring it out, feel free to bring your images to the office hours next week, or email us, and we can help you figure out if you can use it or not. Gianna?
I just had a question about, like, I was looking at the story maps from last year, and I saw some students were able to integrate like articles in their text. So like the one that I was looking at, it was about it just says like the different time periods and stuff like that, and you click, or it says like 500 years, and you click on it and it takes you to an article about how long it takes plastic to break down and stuff like that. So I was just wondering how I could do that in my project.
Yeah, let me go into story maps, and then I can show both the image icon and how to add something like that. So let's see. I'll share my screen. So I think what you were referring to was there's this button feature that you can add to your story maps. So you can say like wakeboard download link or something like that. And then when you edit it, you can add a link here. So if I wanted to do the WaveWord dataset portal, I can add that here. And then when people click on this button, it'll open up that link. That is the main way to do it. I know a lot of other people can embed like whole apps and whole like videos and things like that. So in the web page that you're looking at that you want to add a link to in your story maps, you can sort of search and see if there's an embed link and then copy and paste that here. And then for images, let me just add one of the screenshots from the Living Atlas land cover tool that I got. So here's this, I'll add that. You can either put the credits in the caption, or if you go into the options, there's this image link that you can put in it too. Under properties, you can also just say who took it. For example, if it's like a local person, you can just say like, what is this? Esri Living Atlas. And then when you save it, there's this little icon that shows up that shows who made, like who.
Excuse me, but we can only see your wallpaper. We can't see anything right now.
Oh, no, sorry. Okay, can you see the story map screen now? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this is the button that I was talking about. So there's button. You can add, I'll just do this example again, wait for download link. And then in the edit button, I can just put a link to it there. And then when people hover over and click on it, they can be directed to that link. And then here I've added this image. If you go into the settings, into options, under properties, you can write out who to give credit to. But then in display, you can also share an image link that people can open up when they click on the image. But also you can put credits in the caption as well if you want to do that. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? Gianna?
Sorry, I just had one more question.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for like starting your story map and like to hook the reader?
Yeah, so one thing that we do usually is we'll just make an outline in like a Google Doc or something like that, just to sort of make sure that we have like a story and a flow for it. So if you're having trouble figuring out like how to organize things, I would suggest like making an outline like that, and then you can sort of add in your outline like insert map here, like insert image here or something like that, and that can also help you keep track of the different maps that you need to make. And another tip that I mentioned in another session, which I think would be really great, is if you want to share your story map with like your friends and family and see what they think about it, and they can give you some information too. So in the Google Classroom, I'll also put the discussion board where people can share their story maps and give feedback as well. Are there any other questions? Yes, Uame?
I actually have a question.
Mhm.
If we are working as a group, should we have the same project in all our GIS accounts, or just one of the group members mentions the other in the project?
Yeah, you should just have one person have the story map. And then again, make sure that it's shared to the organization so that your group members can look at it and edit it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think that's it for today, but we'll send you your project feedback today, and then I'll work on the Google Classroom today so that everyone has a place to put their data sets and any feedback for story maps. And we'll also share the slideshow that I presented today. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you on Monday.